After 3 long years, we finally have a new Fire Emblem game, and although it's not a typical strategy game, and instead a Warriors game, we do get the chance to jump back into Fodlan alongside the Three Houses cast. Unlike many other Fire Emblem games that take place in the same world, Three Hopes is not a sequel, a prequel, or even telling the story of the time skip, but instead takes place in an alternate timeline where the three lords, Dimitri, Edelgard, and Claude, do not meet Byleth, but instead meet a mercenary named Shez. It's the perfect setting to revisit Fodlan, but how well can Three Hopes pull off this new story and game? Well, in this review, I'll be breaking down the game, analyzing the game flow, battle systems, support systems, and story. The review will be completely spoiler-free until the end, where I will give a massive spoiler warning, then go completely wild talking about the story, including the ending. Just for clarity's sake, I've only beaten one of the 3 routes so far, which was the Azure Gleam, the Dimitri route. So let's go ahead and jump in and start talking about the battle system first. Just like every other Warriors game, Three Hopes battles consist of mowing down hundreds of enemies, capturing areas, and defeating bosses. But Three Hopes makes this gameplay much more engaging and interesting through its varied win conditions. Often you'll be tasked with chasing down escaping enemies, turning off weapons like ballista or catapults, escorting allies to safe points, defending allies from an onslaught of enemies, and many more objectives. And while many of these objectives are simple, what makes them interesting is how they are spread out throughout the map and how they can overlap with each other. This often leads to the player needing to be able to issue out commands to all their available units to ensure all objectives can be carried out quickly. Three Hopes even takes it one step further by introducing the infamous weapon triangle from the baseline Fire Emblem games, and even expanding on it. For players who want to play on higher difficulties, this will be important as it allows them to make strategic choices where to send specific units, so they always have the weapon triangle advantage. This also means not only are you running around destroying waves of enemies, but you are switching between characters constantly to make sure objectives are done quickly. This adds a nice sense of strategic gameplay to what would typically be mindless button mashing. Many of the more difficult missions will force you to constantly be on your toes as you attempt to complete as many objectives as possible, especially if you want to get the bonus rewards from completing the level on S rank. Don't let this scare you away from the game though, as on lower difficulties players will be able to largely ignore some of the strategic elements, or can even equip their characters with ridiculously overpowered weapons to smash through enemies no matter who they are. But these are just the basics of Three Hopes gameplay. The game also has a ton of great systems to allow players to choose what kind of gameplay they enjoy, as well as how to improve their characters. For example, you'll find all the classes available in Three Houses in Three Hopes, and each of them have unique gameplay and attack patterns, really allowing players a ton of flexibility to find what suits them best. Not only that, there's a skill and weapon system, which allows players to further customize their units to their liking. Every character also has a unique skill, which allows them to further differentiate themselves from other characters. For example, Dimitri has an exclusive skill that allows his attacks to deal lightning damage, or Petra, who gets a unique dodge that lets her dash across the battlefield while dealing wind damage. Some of these unique skills are very cool, while others are a bit lacking. But the best thing is the game actually offers ways to get around this later on as well. These systems all come together extremely well to make an enjoyable player experience, and offer enough depth to combat that even the excessive button mashing doesn't get boring. While many other Warriors games such as Asia Calamity, One Piece Pirate Warriors, and others were unable to hold my attention more than a couple hours at most, I never had that problem with Three Hopes. I was always looking forward to playing more, and I would attribute this largely to how well the game flows. In a typical chapter, players will first be greeted by a cutscene explaining the story and current events. Then they will be dropped off at camp, which is very similar to the monastery part of Three Houses. Essentially, you'll get a chance to run around in Shez, talking to everybody, buying items, upgrading weapons at the blacksmith, choosing how you want to train your characters, doing chores, going on expeditions, or even sitting down with some characters and having a meal. These all act as a nice break in between combat chapters, for the player to catch their breath. They also give the player a chance to bond with their favorite characters and build support with them. Speaking of supports are back and they are wonderfully done in this game. While there are not support conversations for every pairing of every possible character, there are still a ton of them available in Three Hopes. Also, I found a majority of them to be interesting and informative. Many of them building on our favorite characters' backgrounds, building up the world of Fodlan, or even exploring sides of characters we've never got a chance to see in Three Houses. The only negative thing I have to say is that some of the supports rely on the player having played Three Houses for context. An example of this is Sylvain's supports. In a ton of the supports, characters will bring up how he was a womanizer and how he has changed. but at no point in Three Hopes do they ever show that side of Sylvain. So if someone hasn't played Three Houses, I could see how it would be confusing for them. That criticism can also be extended to the overall story itself. Saying that, let's jump into the non-spoiler story section of the review. Like I mentioned earlier, Three Hopes is an alternate timeline of the Three Houses storyline. So while there are some overlapping events, like Edelgard's invasion, the context and details surrounding those incidents is completely different. This allows the game to tell a new story, but at the same time, build up the world of Fodlan. In Three Houses, we often heard of powerful nobles, family members, or even territories, but never got to experience them firsthand. But Three Hopes changes that. Infamous characters like Holst, Hilda's older brother, or Count Burgles, Casper's father, finally get introduced into the game, and some of them are even playable. Not only that, Three Hopes does a great job of expanding on the politics of certain areas. For example, in my playthrough of Azure Gleam, I got the chance to see the state of Ferdiad firsthand, learn about the conflicts between the areas inside it, as well as conflicts with surrounding nations like Shreg. All of these details do an amazing job of expanding the world and making it feel more realistic. It's always amazing when a game can show the world and not just tell the player about it, which was something Three Houses definitely struggled with. The game also does an amazing job of expanding on key events that we heard about in Three Houses, but weren't fully explored. One of those major events in the game is the tragedy of Dusker. We constantly hear about it in Three Houses, but we never get the chance to fully learn what happened. In Three Hopes, they don't hold back. Not only do they explore the details of the events, but everybody who was involved in it, and they even go further to expand on the impact it had throughout Vargas. Honestly, Three Hopes Stories did an amazing job of expanding on the world of Fodlan and making me care even more about my favorite characters. I am now going to be approaching the spoiler section of the review. If you do not want to be spoiled on the Azure Gleam storyline, then I recommend you jump to the timestamp being shown below. This is your final warning. Spoilers ahead. Hopefully everyone who doesn't want to be spoiled has left, because I have a lot to talk about when it comes to this story. First, let's start with our new main character, Shez and Arvel. Shez is essentially Byleth 2.0. They are a mercenary with a god stuck inside them who gives them superpowers. Now, unlike Byleth, Shez has a lot more personality, and the game gives the player some great dialogue options to get to see different sides of them. There's also a ton of supports with Shez, so everyone will get a chance to see them interact with just about every cast member. Now let's talk about Shez as a character and their role in the story. Shez is overall a likable character. Their personality is fun and upbeat, so it's easy to enjoy them. But personally, they were not my favorite character by any means. A lot of the time I felt Shez's dialogue was just tacked into important conversations. We'd have Dimitri discussing war tactics with Rodrigue, and Shez would just throw in a random comment, and sometimes no one would even respond to it. Shez's main conflict throughout the story is trying to remember who they are, where their mysterious power came from, and if one day they will lose control of their body. It was decently written, and does come up quite often in the story, but it never felt compelling for me. All we know is for some reason Arvel wants to defeat Byleth, and we really don't get answers to why until the last couple of chapters. Even if it was pretty obvious for anyone who knows Byleth's connection to Sothis, it never felt like the most important thing happening. The big reveal that Arvel was created by some dark god, and it was evil, wasn't shocking by any means, and honestly didn't add much to the plot. But it did give a great chance to get Dimitri, Edelgard, and Claude to work together, which was cool. Personally, what really grabbed my attention was the story of Dimitri and the Blue Lions. Unlike Three Houses where the story is quite tame until the time skip, Three Hopes cranks it up to 10 quickly. We get a chance to see Dimitri ascend to the throne after literally beheading his uncle. Then we get to explore all the struggles of being a king, from the politics of conflicting areas to dealing with invasions and even betrayals. While I absolutely loved the Azure Moon story in Three Houses, it was a character story that focused completely on Dimitri, his struggles with his mental illness, and eventually his role as king. Three Hopes does an amazing job of showing a completely different side of that story. We not only get a chance to explore Dimitri, but also all the Blue Lions, especially Felix, the Dew, and Sylvain. By allowing the focus of the story to be spread between several characters instead of just one, it gets a chance to breathe and show off how dynamic and dark the world can truly be. But that isn't to say that they shrug off Dimitri's struggles. The game does a great job of making sure to remind players that Dimitri still has his problems, it's just that they aren't as bad as they were in Three Houses. When it came to the Blue Lion story, I enjoyed almost all of it. Getting to finally see Dimitri face off against those who slither in the dark and reveal the truth of the tragedy of Dusker was therapeutic. I'm glad we were finally able to learn more about the organization and how much power they really had. While none of the members of those who slither in the dark are super compelling antagonists, It was enjoyable to face off against them, and for a while to have two major antagonists in the story. Unfortunately, I can't say the same thing about our other antagonist, Edelgard. Now this is the part of the story I really disliked, and if I had any complaint about Three Hopes, this would be it. Now do remember I have only beaten one route so far, so more complaints may arise as I beat the other two, but let's jump into the Edelgard situation that arises in Azur. Now in Three Hopes, the events that led up to Edelgard's invasion are quite different. Edelgard is able to expunge Talus and company from the Empire before the invasion, and doesn't rely on them as a source of power, which I have a lot of thoughts about, but I'll save that for the Crimson Blaze video. Either way, Edelgard is a great antagonist for the first part of the game. Facing off against the Empire is exciting, and the battles are all amazing and a ton of fun. But after the battle for Arianrod, everything changes. Dimitri and Edelgard finally face off, and as Dimitri is about to land the finishing blow, Talus shows up and uses some dark magic on Edelgard, turning her into hegemonic or fallen Edelgard, and she goes on a rampage. This wasn't completely surprising, but it has some big implications for the story. First of all, could he have done that at any point? Was Edelgard always susceptible to being transformed and controlled, or was this because she was weakened due to her fight with Dimitri? The problem with this twist in the story is now Edelgard is completely removed as an antagonist from the story. She is no longer in control of the Empire, and is now a mere puppet of Talus. Not only that, Hubert just disappears and is never seen again. While I may not agree with Edelgard's war, what made Edelgard a compelling character was her willingness to bear responsibility for all the horrible things that this war would bring. The countless deaths, destruction of livelihood, and the hatred of thousands. She believed her ideals were worth this type of sacrifice. But now all responsibility is pretty much removed from Edelgard. She is no longer a powerful independent ruler, she's just a puppet, and kinda feels like a damsel in distress, which is the complete opposite of her character. What makes things worse is when Dimitri finally beats Talus, Edelgard doesn't even revert to her old self. She remains as some simple-minded puppet. It's honestly a much more horrific ending than her fate in Azur Moon. Last things I want to discuss are Claude and Byleth. Claude pretty much remains himself throughout the story of Azur, but he does make mention of wanting to start a war after ending this one, which was a big red flag for me. I haven't played the Golden Deer route yet, so I don't know how that turns out, but it definitely left a bad taste in my mouth, as it would essentially make Claude follow in Edelgard's footsteps, though not to such an extreme degree. Byleth, on the other hand, actually becomes a better character in this game. They are unstrapped from the responsibilities of being the player's self-insert, and because of that, they get a chance to grow, and the player gets to see them as the Ashen Demon themselves, which is very cool. It also allows the game to explore Byleth and Geralt's relationship more, which was a very nice addition. With all that said, how does Three Hopes do as a Fire Emblem and Warriors game? Was it an enjoyable experience, and is it worth your money? Honestly, this game is an amazing entry into the Fire Emblem franchise, even as a spin-off. It does a great job of exploring the world and characters of Fodlan. It makes the world a much more lived-in place and explores elements of the world that we weren't able to in Three Houses. The story does a great job of exploring new content and fixing some of the complaints of the original game. The combat is surprisingly a ton of fun. As someone who has played warrior games in the past and always found them a bit too simplistic or repetitive, Three Hopes does a great job of mixing up the pace of the game, so players don't get exhausted of just smashing through waves of enemies. It also adds several layers of depth to the game, so there are a ton of different playstyles to enjoy. Though there are less support conversations in Three Houses, I found almost all of them to be enjoyable and well written. Now the game isn't perfect. There are definitely some negatives. First of all, if you hate Warriors gameplay, this game won't completely fix that. You probably won't enjoy the game and are better off watching videos for the story. Second, the camp part of the game could get a bit boring, especially if you are on your second or third playthrough. Lastly, there are some aspects of the story I found a bit problematic, but overall, I did enjoy the story a ton. If you are a massive Three Houses or Warriors fan, this game is a must-buy in my opinion. The game by far is the best Warriors game I've ever played, and the amount of content you'll be getting is absolutely insane. It took me almost 47 hours to complete one out of the 3 routes, and I didn't even complete all the content. So if you want a good bang for your buck, this game is going to be one of the best options out there. I could not recommend Three Hopes more, and I hope that my love for this game stays strong after completing the other 2 routes. But now I would love to hear from you. Did you buy Three Hopes, and are you enjoying it? What route did you pick? And which characters are you enjoy playing? Make sure to drop a comment down below letting me know. If you enjoyed the video, please drop a like and subscribe. It helps destroy the evil that is the YouTube algorithm and helps my channel grow. This has been Oblivion, and I'll catch you all later.